Welcome to this month's Fire Chief's video message. This month I have Master Firefighter Mike Skidmore from Station 23, or as I would refer to him, Skids. Welcome, Skids.
Good morning, Chief. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for coming today, and as we roll into the December and the holiday seasons are among us, I hope that you're preparing for a good holiday or may have already started.
Absolutely. I've got pretty much all my shopping done. So
that's a good thing because obviously our lives get hectic and things can go from unplanned to horrible.
Absolutely.
And we get behind the eight ball if we're not prepared, so well done. So you obviously had expressed your interest back several months ago, along with a bunch of other folks, and you waited patiently, and now you're here in December. You and I talked a little bit briefly last week, and you got a couple items and topics that you wanted to bring to the table today and have the folks with inside MCFRS hear about. So what do you got for us?
Well, one of the things I was curious about, I work with the maps at Station 23, and we had discussed having a standardized mapping system across the county. We once started with a PS 2000, but that kind of really never took off. So most stations do their own mapping, and so I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Truly, with 37 stations and 500 square miles, it's a great endeavor to ensure accurate and complete mapping information is available. So I'm going to roll back a little bit to where I came from and reference a project that Kensington did it was under the direction of Steve Lohr as the station officer at the time at 21, and Master Firefighter retired now Katie Matheny as the actual worker bee who did a lot of the work. At that time, this was in the mid 80s, the late 80s time frame, Station Kensington articulated and combined all of the 4 stations into one map book, and it was an ADC style of map so that it went from page to page and the edges connected to each other and really was all the same scale, all the same orientation of mapping. So if you went from 18 to 5 or 21 to 25, you had a reference as to what type of maps you had. I know you've worked in parts of the county where maps are older than you are, and you've worked in parts of the county where maps don't help because the streets are still almost dirt and gravel, and there's new houses already up, and you have to be constantly updating your maps at the station level. One of the things that I remain confident and very resolved about is we need to have our maps base be paper. Our base maps need to be paper because paper relatively doesn't fail. Sure, you may lose a map book. Sure, you may spill something or it may get damaged. But as we deal with electronics, my iPad in front of me, the GPS, the Garmin, the phone, or even our MDCs in the yellow brick road, electronics will have a hiccup. And inevitably that hiccup will be at 1 o'clock in the morning with 2 folks that don't know the area very well. And when they try to use their electronic base map, they don't have the ability, it doesn't work. Now they're in punt mode and they're delaying the response. And Mrs. Smith is the person who is the recipient of delayed response, and we cannot afford that. So we have to have paper as our base. We always have to be able to reach over, pull out the paper map book, flip the page, have an index, and jump to it so we can get to the structure off of a paper map book. Clearly, tablets, MDCs, yellow brick roads, the red book, there's several people, not say several, there's a lot of people in our department that don't even remember when ADC was our backup.
Right, yeah.
And we used to have 3 or 4 ADC books in each unit, and that was your backup to your station paper. Because if you went outside of your 3rd, 4th, or 5th area, that's what you had was the ADC to get you there. So paper's got to be our base. And what you highlight in our discussions prior to this is, Sarah Irely is such a great resource we have internal to the department about getting the GIS data, getting it pushed out to the station folks, being able to use it with the Visio computer and tie it to the specificities you need at the station level to have site plans. while there's an amazing resource that was completed back last April, there's a PDF of every station's street index with all of the water layer completed in there, that can be used as a baseline for beyond your normal response area. But each station still needs to have a core capability of street maps with hydrants and specificities of building layouts. And then what only can be done, at the station level, it's not the detail of a pre-plan, it's the detail of a site plan.
Yeah.
I'll harken back to the Station 8, elements of, they had their street maps, and then they had their complex maps, and then they had their townhouse and apartment book.
Yep.
And each of them has a specific use and purpose, and we need to maintain that. Now, what you're looking for as a person who's worked in a few different places across the county in about 15 years is some uniformity in that. And there was a project that rose through the last COLA class at the Academy and was presented to the senior staff, and was of great value and merit of having a baseline type of mapping convention, as I would describe it, so that each person at the station level who's working on mapping uses the same scale, the same references, the same type of architecture, so that those maps become much more similar.
Absolutely,
from that perspective. That was assigned to the operations divisions to look at, and I do believe that was also given to a captain to tie into a class project that he was working on through some undergrad work. So that's something that's clearly in the work process, and the people usually ask, what happens to new data that comes in when there's a new street gets built? And in your community, the Pike and Rose, as we talked about, what used to be the Mid-Pike Plaza and the stuff around the White Flint district, as new structures go in there, the street may be named, the street may get built, and it still may be 6 months or 12 months before the street shows up on the map. And that's a lag, a process between park and planning, the county GIS office, and the frequency and ability to do a data load into the MDCs, as an example, or into the GIS layer. So that's why, as I say, the baseline still needs to be station level adjustments with station level 8.5 by 11 scaled map, so that when something happens, you can just simply add that street on there. As we know, what's planned for hydrant location may be adjusted to the other side of the street or the other side of a half a block away, and that specificity is critically important at 3 o'clock in the morning in the dark with all of those other factors. So for everybody at the station level who works on maps, thank you very much, yourself included. Yes, you need to go out there. Yes, everybody needs to be attuned to our station familiarity and first due response areas, and the best way of doing it is driving it. And while it may feel redundant, you may think, gee, I just did that, why are we doing that again? Why Skid's asking me to go back and check that map again? The reality is if we drive through that complex, especially new ones, we're going to be able to have that recall when we get to that event. So there is work afoot, there is a core basis, but everybody needs to understand, as I want to make sure, active 911 is not our friend. Active 911 in this equation is a good tool, but if you're using it as your base response routing, guys and gals, don't. Please stop. If you haven't noticed that if it's confused, it takes you to the middle of Station 8's area on Game Preserve Road. No matter where the call is, if it doesn't know where it is, it drops you into Game Preserve near the railroad tracks off of Clopper Road in Station 8's area.
Okay.
And we truly have had a unit that tried to follow that from a station that was somewhat close, but was really off base. So you can't use active 911 as your only mapping source. It can be a reference, it can be your second or third, but you got to use your station paper primary, maybe your GPS, your Garmin if you're an EMS unit as a support. and then active 911 or something else like that could be a tertiary support reference. But don't rely on active 911 for response unit routing. So keep up the work at the station level, but understand paper's your base.
Very
And
good.
guys
Very
and
good.
gals, support the paper updates and process.
Thank you.
So, yeah, definitely a big issue. And as we become more and more diverse community, we get a lot newer names, newer streets. What we knew what was 20 years ago is not the same, and our staff is not as familiar with the response areas as we were 20 years ago, because it's different where we work and different than where we live. So, core points to talk about.
Yeah, we get a lot of firefighters too from out of state, so
Yep.
they don't really have a base of reference for our community either. So it's important for them, like you said, to get out and learn the streets.
Yep. So after mapping, you had two other issues that you wanted to touch base on.
One of them was specifically regarding the master firefighter and lieutenant process. It's upcoming in 2016. You know, we just got through with the captain's exam and heard a lot of good things about that process. So, as an individual who's going to be taking that lieutenant exam, I'm just curious what the future holds for that.
Yep. There's a group working between administrative staff and executive officers with the union that are looking at what we would describe as the combined MFF and LT exam process. It's obviously been that way for many years, and there's that inevitable question of, you passed the written exam for master firefighter several years ago when you got promoted to master firefighter. Now, if you want to excel to the lieutenant's rank, you have to take the same written exam relatively again, which is a hybrid of elements that relate to the master firefighter rank and the lieutenant rank. Why should you be tested to that same component again? Why, as a lieutenant candidate, should not you be tested on elements specific to the rank that you're looking to ascend to? Clearly, the lieutenant top 45 move into an assessment center process, so there is a separate step. So there's a group that's looking at that. They've made a recommendation to both myself and President Buttle about doing a break of those two, maybe not breaking it in the context of different timing, but breaking it as a concept of different tests.
Okay.
So if there's 125 questions, which is usually the baseline of questions, that, yeah, maybe 75 or 80 of them are MFF-based questions, and there's another 40 or so that are the LT-based questions. And if you are a firefighter 3 and you want to compete for both, then you take both tests.
Correct.
If you're only competing for or applying for the lieutenant's exam, you're only taking the 40 questions.
Oh, okay.
And then
Very nice.
transitioning into the second step of the assessment center process. Because why are you being retested again for what you've already succeeded and passed in the past? So that's part of the recommendations that group is looking at. Now, this will not be changed overnight. This will not probably be accomplished before the next MFF LT exam process in 2016, because we need to do a class and compensation adjustment to change that component, and that has to be worked through county human resources to do that dynamic of change. So it's something that President Buttle and I are both interested in, and do believe there's a benefit to separate the opportunity. The group is working on the other component of that, is what is the right steps for a firefighter 3 to ascend straight to lieutenant.
Okay.
And because that's an opportunity that's available today, as a person who did not do that, but many do, there are some negatives for the employee who does that, both exposure, experience, as well as potentially service and merit negatives. So the goal of this group is to come back with recommendations about, is there a recommendation to keep it possible that they can do a firefighter 3 to lieutenant jump by taking both exams at the same time,
Right.
or a request that we work through county human resources and make it a required stepping stop for everybody to hit master firefighter and then be able to then ascend to lieutenant at a different, after the master firefighter rank. Work in progress, something that's been in place for several years or decades technically, and again, won't probably change for this 2016 test cycle, but something that's ongoing, and change will probably be coming forward with that.
Wow. Look forward to seeing what the changes will be.
Okay. So the next element that you had talked about was color of shirts,
Yep.
identification of personnel. What's your basis there?
So honestly, a couple, I guess it was probably about a year ago, I had a relatively new officer come in. I had never met him. Walked into Station 23, and I basically asked, who are you? And he was wearing a standard blue shirt, just like I'm wearing, having no idea that he was going to be one of my officers. And I know that there are a lot of people who don't like the white shirt because it gets dirty, but I think it's very important to have something that differentiates you. One, for all the lower ranking people who may or may not know you, and for the community. So what are your thoughts on bringing our line officers back to white or a different colored shirt?
Agree with you wholeheartedly. I believe I've said it here before. Believe fully that identity to recognize an officer or officers and a group of personnel is important. The ability for the ease of recognition. If there's 10 folks standing there and a citizen walks up and says, who's the officer, you can turn around and say, ma'am, that's Lieutenant Smith over here, and that's the gentleman in the X-colored shirt, and I'll walk you over to him. It's important from that perspective, from the community perspective. It's important from our perspective, as you identified. You walk up to a group of people as the master firefighter from the medic unit, you want to talk to the engine officer. And if you don't know who that person is, because you don't, in your example, you're having, okay, who's the officer? And you if you know by color of shirt, you can get to the right person. Clearly we have a color identification of rank once we put our uniforms on, or our turnout coats. White helmets, all officers. Yellow helmets, for firefighters, blue, red as an example. We need to re-implement that to the line officer level. I have worked with President Buttle. We've reconstituted the Uniform Advisory Committee. They had been led by Chief Davis in the past, and which led to the change in the uniform/apparel policy. And the UAC, as the acronym is, has met, and one of their primary elements was to look at uniform colors. I don't believe personally that white's in a good color for line officers, as you mentioned, for dirt. Keeping it clean. If you take the lieutenant, put him in a fire, wearing a white shirt, white t-shirt, red suspenders, now you have a candy cane looking like shirt because you have red stripes on your white shirt. So I don't believe white is the best color for the guys and gals who are riding the apparatus. Obviously, before we went to all blue, we had blue and burgundy, Barney, wine, whatever the acronym people wanted to use for the color of shirt. And that identification. It's just the color was, not looked upon very, well by most of our folks. Is it a light blue shirt? Is it a gray shirt? Don't really care. I'd be interested in getting, and that's what I've asked for UAC to provide recommendations back. What color? At the same time, I also do like, and you're using you did this unscripted. You're using a Class C shirt with red embroidered, components in lieu of metallic pin-on badges. Very sharp shirt, very much clean and crisp, and we don't have to worry about these things falling off and as such. And I believe that's an important element to the line officer shirt as well, is to have that stuff embroidered on, but I want that to be consistent. I want all the line officers, if they're wearing a gray shirt, I want all the line officers, as an example, to have gold embroidery on their shirt, on the collar pins, as an insignia embroidered on, name embroidered on, MCFRS as an example, all that to be consistent. Because if you take 10 officers today, you will see some in a Class C blue shirt with embroidery, but the colors are different. Some are red, some are gold, some are white, some are combinations of colors. And I want us to have a good image and be able to be, as I say, uniform in that image. So I'd like to see UAC's recommendations reference that, and clearly want to see the folks be able to be identified through that color element, because it helps our public safety partners, because our law enforcement folks want to seek out the lieutenant or captain. We also, at hospitals or stuff like that, and any of those activities where we can say, yep, the gentleman in the gray shirt, that's the lieutenant or captain. The gentleman or lady in the white shirt, that's the chief. And, identify folks that way. When we're in the community, internally to us, it matters as well, as we use as an example, but it's more tie with the community folks and such. So great questions, something that's in the works, and I hope UAC comes in the near future with the recommendation.
Very good, very good.
So your other element was?
My last question was, again, as someone who's aspired to be a lieutenant and a line officer, we once had I believe it's a couple-week-long OCS program. Now we have COLA, which I believe is about a week long. Any thoughts on improving, making that longer, making it bigger, better? Any thoughts on that?
So OCS was Officer Candidate School. That went on for several sessions, several year cycles. All lieutenants and captains desired or requested to go into that. Not a mandatory component. It lapsed for a couple of years. Last year we completed the COLA, as you said, COLA, Company Officer Leadership Academy was the words tied to the acronym. And again, that was offered to the folks that had made the lieutenant's exam list and was adjusted from, as you said, about a 2-week class originally down to I think it was an 8-day class, 4 days and 4 days spread over 2 weeks. And as we talked about, the mapping program was a project that the COLA class, a group in the COLA class created, then rose through the COLA class, was recommended as one of 2 projects to go forward. And the goal is to have our company officers, provide input and involvement in department initiatives. Clearly, getting tested for rank promotion is a part about knowledge. Once you have completed that, once you're on the well-qualified list or qualified list, and the captain's exam just came out, the captain's list just came out yours today and was announced last week. Some great candidates on that list, a very well run test and a very challenging test for all the candidates that took it, as you may have heard and you mentioned.
Absolutely.
The element, especially for the new lieutenant, because as you go from lieutenant to captain, you've already been an officer for at least that 2-year period. As you go from master firefighter, or even as we talked about firefighter 3 to lieutenant, you have a big jump and there's a big change. And some of our folks are able to have some of those experiences prior to the actual jump, and some aren't. I truly and deeply support COLA, or the need to have a class and process. The element is a tie to funding. The COLA class was supported by EMST revenue and was a element in the FY15 EMST funding stream. As we get to the next list, the next lieutenant's list as an example, it would be my goal to have that class again, and to not teach the new officers how to fill out a form, not teach the new officers how to use an electronic system, but to teach the officers and to provide them the opportunity to get more information about operations, how to, what to, and what they may be exposed to prior to being detailed into Station X and being with a new group of folks and exposed to new things. Again, as you get tested for lieutenant rank, you do have a tabletop scenario with the exam process, but COLA class gets you more into that, gets you more scenario-based activities and more practical skills towards incident operations, but also practical skills towards resource management, personnel management more specifically. And when you get faced with the human interaction of one of your employees having an issue that you need to manage, how do you technically manage that? What resources do you use, and how are you to use those resources to help you help the employee and process through the issue? So COLA is something that would wish to continue and see it as a true benefit. It's very similar to an initiative that I've talked about to the chief officers. Is the same exact thing on the chief level.
Okay.
Is there's a chief bump up class for new battalion chief candidates. I want to spread that out across the entire system as an optional class that the folks can take, both career and volunteer, because once you get your bugles crossed and you're now a battalion chief, you are thrusted into that role. And if you haven't done but the minimalist approach of your ride-alongs, you're missing a lot of opportunities. And we do that exact same thing with the captain candidates for battalion chief to make them eligible to be a battalion chief bump up.
Right.
You need to do that, continue that at all levels of accession, from master to lieutenant and then captain to battalion chief. So definitely something that we want to do and has a value to personnel and professional improvement of our person.
Oh, very good. Awesome.
So core great questions and as such. Were one of those questions, usually I ask my guests, what did you bring from the shift? Those were your questions or the shift's questions?
Actually, I chose to stick with my shift,
Okay.
and we discussed this over a few week period, and those were really the ones that we hashed out after our conversation on last shift. We went over it one last time just to make sure that we were all together on the same page, and just glad to share that stuff because it came from my shift. So
and that's the goal of having the guests is we can have topics that we're talking about, but if the topics come from the field, it's something that you all are interested in. It's something you're one of 37. You're more of 120. 37 stations and 3 shifts. There's give or take right about 120 families, and then when we add our volunteer duty crews and the 7 nights at some of those stations, it's a lot of different families, and your same questions are the same questions that they're having. So that's why I asked the questions to come from the guest.
yeah.
So each month I like to do a recognition. We've talked about the folks at FEI last month. We've talked about the folks at Apparatus before that. We talked about the folks at the PSTA before that. One of the things that is prevalent as we've made some changes within our organization is CPR. High performance CPR as an example, the ability for return of spontaneous circulations, return of pulses. Our save rates a little over 40-45% now on CPR activities. And that's what we are expected to do when we get dispatched on that 9 Echo, that working code. That's what we give you the tools for, and all of our men and women, everybody else that you work with, do a great job at. And our pit crew approach that Bob Lindsay started to lead the initiative and now is protocol is clearly working as it relates to CPR and that saving of those lives and getting the patient to the hospital. I'm not going to specifically name names today, but I know our folks are making a difference when they're off duty as well. I hear the reports. I see the emails from this person was at a 5K run and somebody dropped of a heart attack, and they initiated bystander CPR. An AED was available. Did CPR for several cycles, and shock was provided, and we had a return of pulse.
Very good.
Person
That's
was
awesome.
saved. 2 guys were up in another event. Gentleman, fell down, fell out. Same thing. They initiated CPR off duty, did the same skills that they would do when they're bringing all their tools with them, but they did it with limited tools. And as I become aware of these occurrences, I'm going to be providing recognition of those folks, as individual personnel for what they've done, because, yep, that's what you're expected to do when you're working. And I really appreciate the fact that our folks are taking that initiative, and because they know and how effective their interventions can be, as long as you have that AED and that rapid CPR initiation, we can do, bring these people back and give these people a chance to get to a definitive medical care. So this month's acknowledgement is everybody who engages off duty, engages outside of their duty schedule, or their standby, or their work day, and makes a difference. Maybe it's an accident scene you stop at. Maybe it's that CPR that you initiate off duty. But you are making a difference off duty as much as you are on duty. And I want to say thank you to everybody at this point. And as I say, if our folks are doing that, please send that up to chain of command. Let us know about it, because those folks need to be, recognized, and it's an important element to say thanks for your great job. So that's my recognition of the month, is to everybody who's doing an off-duty, intervention, off-duty public safety element. So thank you.
Awesome, phenomenal.
December's here. We're getting really close to the holidays. Our weather is beautiful right now. It's going to turn bad, I'm sure. They are forecasting a bad February. Everybody needs to make sure that we're prepared for bad weather. It will come. Make sure that both your home and family is prepared and your station's prepared. Make sure that we got all those things ready to go. When you're preparing to come to work with a bad weather forecast, bring an extra bag. Bring your extra things with you, because you may be there for a little bit longer than your 24 hours or your 12 hours, whatever your standby or shift is. But always be able to prepare that we know we have to come to work with our mindset ready for work, but we always have to prepare our home and our family, because we have to be comfortable and confident that they're in good shape when the weather's bad, when we can't get home to support them. That may be through a friend network, that may be through a neighbor network, but always ensure that your home issues are resolved and they're prepared as you are physically and mentally prepared with the right stuff when you come to work. As we get into the weather and the holiday season, we will inevitably have those long days, those long nights of long calls and tough conditions. So next month, still have another couple speakers on tap waiting to go. Next month, my guest is Eric Bernard from the Montgomery County Volunteer Fire Rescue Association, a person that we recognize, and we're date back a few years, back to days at 31 together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So welcome Eric to being with me next month, and thank you for coming, and thanks to 23B Shift for putting together some ideas. And as we know, I'm going to get a little dig in here. Engine versus tower. Yeah, I'm still an engine guy. And
sorry to hear that.
Well, so is Lieutenant Ransom, but there's a few others that aren't. So for 23B and the folks that gave Skids the information to come here today, thank you for your help. To everybody, take care, be prepared for the holidays, have a good holidays, and ensure that, as we say always, be ready to answer that call, and have a good day. Take care, be safe, and inevitably stay warm as the season gets upon us.